Did you know that visceral fat is linked to heart disease and diabetes? The good news, you can start losing it in just weeks, and I'm going to give you my 3 rules, the only 3 rules to lose that visceral body fat. I have been a trainer for over 10 years. I've trained lots of people, and we have worked specifically on body fat for almost exclusively all of my clients. I sometimes take other types of clients, but visceral fat is something that goes whenever a person trains with me, and we reduce their overall body fat. So first, what is visceral body fat? Why is it, or what is visceral fat? Why is it different than subcutaneous fat or fat under the skin? Fat under the skin is located closer to the surface. Visceral body fat is what is attached to your organ. So it's considered more dangerous to have visceral body fat, and that's why it's linked with diabetes, heart disease, and other things. There's lots of things that visceral body fat is linked with. But overall, and I kind of want to encourage you with this, it's not as scary as it sounds. Typically, like why, in my opinion, why is visceral fat linked with those things? It's because typically a person already has excessive adipose tissue or body fat on their body. So whenever you have excessive body fat, it starts to pack itself around the organ. So our goal here is to simply lose body fat. There's no way of actually, if someone tells you there's a way of targeting visceral body fat or targeting stomach fat or targeting some type of fat, it doesn't seem to be possible right now, at least in the scientific literature. And so it's something that I would encourage you that as long as you're just doing the right things to lose body fat and you can stay motivated in that regard, and maybe you've had trouble and that's what I'm going to talk about here, then you're going to be losing that visceral body fat and getting healthier at the same time. So bottom line, we know that we have to lose body fat, and the only way to lose that body fat, visceral or not, is going to be in a calorie deficit. There is no other way around it. You have to eat less calories than you expend. So we're going to talk about some tricks on how to do that, things that I track and things that I have my clients do. Like I said, the 3 rules to losing that visceral body fat. Okay, so let's hop into these 3 rules. The number 1 thing is that restriction of some kind has to be implemented. You've lived this way, now you have to do something different. Something has to change in order to make a change, right? Everyone kind of knows that. And so the main form of restriction that I like to take with my clients is just going to be general caloric restriction. That's going to be things like recipes, which I'm going to tell you about my recipe book, totally free. I'm going to tell you about that. But recipes and eating less calories. Usually it's in the form of tracking food that we know that we're eating less calories. Some people hate that though. I'm going to go back to calories. I'm going to start with the ones that people maybe have heard of at least more readily recently. So the first type of restriction I'm going to talk about outside of calories is going to be time restriction. So that's something like intermittent fasting. That's not like intermittent fasting. It is intermittent fasting. So from 12 to 8 is the typical window where a person will eat. That's noon to 8 p.m. And then after that, they stop eating. Before that, they're not eating as well. And so until the next day, until noon, they are not eating food. Whether a person realizes it or not, it's not anything special about the intermittent fasting that's causing them to lose body fat. It's not manipulating hormones so that you burn more calories or something like that. It is simply helping them eat less calories. Let's say a person does like a 12 to 5 window. That one seems to be extremely effective, not because the fast is bigger, or you could even do a 10 to 5 window, but the 5 o'clock I think is the magic cutoff, because that's dinner. And a lot of times a person can control themselves up to dinner. And then if they make this rule and they can stick to it, then they won't be consuming the snacks, the sweets, the temptations that come after that, including alcohol. That's a really big one. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next one. But if you can kick out the calories after dinner without anything changing prior, and that's the caveat, then you're going to lose body fat because you had to eat this many calories in order to get to where you're at now. And so if you reduce those calories, of course, you're going to lose body fat. But the problem comes in whenever a person doesn't actually reduce their calories. They don't realize they're not reducing their calories. And so they'll take in more calories before, they'll eat bigger meals knowing that they're going to have a cutoff or whatever the case may be. Especially if alcohol is an issue though. I don't want to say like an issue, like a drinking problem. I'm saying like if a person drinks alcohol and therefore that is part of the problem of what's keeping them overweight, then this can be really effective because typically people aren't going to drink before 5. So it's almost just like equivalent to quitting alcohol, which is a great segue into the next restriction type, which is going to be a food group restriction. Alcohol being a food, it is a food group. It's a macronutrient type. There is protein, carbs, fats, and alcohol. A lot of people don't know that alcohol is a 4th type, has 7 calories per gram. It's the second highest only to fat. And so because of that, if a person kicks out alcohol, a lot of times they will just lose weight simply kicking out alcohol, making no other changes, unless they replace those calories in their diet. And so alcohol is one form of kicking out a food group. Another one, the only other food group or the only other macronutrient that you can kick out and have success with is carb reduction. So that could be something like keto. or carnivore or something like that. Again, there tends to be a problem with kicking out food groups or kicking out something and trying to control it without controlling calories necessarily. And that's that a lot of times a person will eat higher calorie things to, whether they realize it or not, subconsciously make up for that. So a person who is eating carnivore or eating keto, they eat a lot of meats and cheeses that have a ton of calories in them due to the fat content. That's not necessarily bad. It's just whenever it's in that volume that a person isn't used to eating, they would have eaten rice or pasta or something, which, don't get me wrong, that has, decent calories in it as well. But if you replace that volume of rice with a similar volume of sausage, you are going to have a calorie surplus. So then that brings us back to my favorite way of, training my clients, and that is with general caloric restriction. Now, some of my clients, they don't want to do that. They don't want to track their food, and I get it. I'm not going to make them track their food. I'm going to kind of summarize this with something that's, I think, really going to make you feel good in terms of success for you. And if you failed with any of these in the past, don't worry, I got you. But for now, let's talk about calories. So my favorite app to use is MyFitnessPal. You can use other apps or whatever, but they just have a robust database. And so that's what, they have like every food that I've ever seen in there. Sometimes foods aren't in there, but most of the time they are. And so due to that, you can have anything you want. Now that is a good point to bring up my cookbook, totally free. If you find me on Instagram, Aaron Trainer Fitness, I will send that to you. You can just DM me over there. And big meals, big recipes where you can make 8, 9, 10, 11 meals in one sitting. So it's kind of like meal prep. It is meal prep. And lots of high protein foods, which is going to be important for weight loss. Tracking your protein comes right with tracking calories. So getting more protein is really going to help your weight loss. But also they tend to be lower calorie for the volume that you're taking in. So a meal of mine will be somewhere around 400, 500 calories. And you can always divide that up further if you want smaller meals or whatever. But a lot of times my wife has trouble even eating the meals. They're so big. And it's hard to take in 400 calories. She has to stop at 250 or 300 calories. And it's hard to gain weight if you're eating only 300 calories in a single sitting. So it is very, very helpful in order for losing weight. So tracking your calories through the MyFitnessPal app or whatever, it's something that I want to encourage you. It can be difficult at first. It can feel restrictive at first. I think of it as very freeing. If I have 500 calories left and I really want a cookie and the cookie on the package or whatever says it's 200 calories, go for it. You have the freedom to do it. There's no guilt associated with that because you know exactly what you have left. So I think it's very freeing. And I think after a while, most of my clients get to that place where they feel very freed up by it. Also, I want to encourage you that at first it does feel like a true task. It feels kind of difficult. But as you get better at that, especially in MyFitnessPal, you have a history of foods that you have logged. And because of that, there's only like 100 foods that a person eats. You might be doubting that, but I challenge you to find 100 foods that you eat, 100 different foods. After you've logged it once for about 3 months, let's say 2 months. After 2 months, you probably have logged almost every single food that you eat, besides like restaurant food. And all you do is you just find it again. If you tend to eat saltine crackers, you just type in SAL and it'll pop up saltine crackers because you've logged it before. So your goal with any of these is going to be to find whatever is least restrictive. If you feel not trapped by time restrictive eating, you just stop at 5 or stop at 8 or whatever, and that's working for you, by all means, go for it. It might not work forever. It very well could. As you lose weight, you might need to eat less calories, and therefore the time window isn't going to be restrictive enough. You could continue to restrict that time window down, but I find that people tend to quit that just because it is so controlling after a while. If you have a 2-hour time window to eat all of your food, that it just isn't very pleasant anymore. But you want to find whatever is least restrictive to you. So I feel least restricted by far by just eating my calories and tracking my calories. I don't think, and another thing I want to tell you, whenever you get good at this and as you build the skill of food logging, for me, it takes like 5 to 7 minutes a day. Now that's because I have a list of recipes. I make those recipes and I just literally log it, and I have the grams that I don't have to measure a cup. I just have the grams, and this is all in my recipe book and everything. But whatever is least restrictive, that is going to be a winner for you. And that's what I wanted to encourage. That's what I mentioned earlier, that I think you would really enjoy it if you have struggled with diets in the past, your goal is to find something that matches you. And I think that's something that we are kind of growing in as at least a scientific community and a fitness community, in that we understand that there is no best diet for everyone. There is no best way of doing something for everyone. Some of my clients respond really well to intermittent fasting. Others absolutely hate it. And so why would I have them go in that direction? Most people, in my opinion, from what I've seen at least, respond well to calories, because if they want something that might not be so great, some pizza on, Super Bowl Sunday, they can have that because they just log it, and so it's not nearly as restrictive as it might feel like. All right, so the second rule, and sorry if you don't like this, I hope that this really helps you, that I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, and that it will change your life. Workouts are essential. I don't believe many people, it's very few, that diet their way to success. And even if they do purely diet their way to success, by the end they're eating very little. They've probably lost a lot of muscle as well. So exercise helps you keep your muscle. And that's what's really essential here, is your metabolism stays high, your muscle stays high. You actually end up having really good shape by the end of it. A person typically appreciates what they see in the mirror a lot more than if they just lost the body fat, because again, they're losing the muscle with that. And so exercise is absolutely essential. Now we're going to talk about tracking your workouts here in a minute, but really 2 types of exercise, probably pretty self-explanatory. Number 1 is going to be weightlifting or some type of resistance training. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the gym. It could be, with rings, like Olympic rings hung in your basement or something like that, but something to do resistance training. And number 2 is going to be cardio, or some type of, I guess you could sub that out into like informal cardio, such as steps, and then formal cardio, such as I'm going to get on a treadmill or I'm going to go for a run or whatever. But those 2 types of workouts are going to obviously help you keep your muscle. That's the weightlifting side of things. And then burn extra calories. That's the cardio side of things. Now, steps easily could be included with the cardio. So, you could start off with a goal of 8,000 steps. I'm making this up, it kind of depends on your particular situation, but you could start off with a goal of 8,000 steps a day, and that might get you great weight loss right there. And then after a while, that might not work. And so you go to 9,000 or 10,000. And then if you're like, man, I can't get any more steps, then of those 10,000 steps could, a certain percentage of them, I wouldn't aim for steps in this case, but I'm saying, could you not worry so much about steps and add in cardio? So let's say you're still trying to get 10,000 steps a day, but 4 of the days you're going to get, an hour on the treadmill. You might end up with 12,000 steps or longer or more on those days. Or you could just end up with 10,000 steps and you moved a lot less outside of the treadmill, but the treadmill, maybe you have it on a little bit of an incline. Those steps are going to have burned more calories. That's a way of just increasing calorie burn through the cardio. I like to do them both. So I give my clients a goal of, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, whatever their steps are, a little bit more than what they're used to. And then I just program in for them, 2 weightlifting days or 3 weightlifting days, whatever they're up for. And then 2 or 3 cardio days. They could be on the same days as your training sessions, as your weightlifting sessions, or on different days. So, you could work out as much as 6 times a week doing 3 weightlifting and 3 cardio, or you could just work 3 days a week and just do weightlifting, cardio, but they're longer workouts. Okay, now the third rule is going to be tracking. Tracking is absolutely essential. I don't think a person should feel restricted by that. Kind of like with the calories, I feel like a person should be freed up by that. Meaning that, hey, I know that I'm doing better because I'm seeing it in my workouts, or I know that I can have this piece of pie because I see that I have 700 calories left, or whatever. So it should be very freeing for you. The first thing that you're going to track is your weight, almost daily. I mean, you might miss a day just because you forget or something, but literally trying to step on the scale every single day. You wake up, you go to the bathroom, you step on the scale with as little clothes on as possible in order to make that as accurate as possible. So that's going to give you your true weight, not individual weigh-ins. I want to stress that the individual weigh-in is probably never going to be your true weight, but the pattern of weigh-ins, that's what we're looking for. So if you notice that you step on the scale and you have a spike that day, I feel it too. Trust me, I get it. It doesn't feel good, but it's not your true weight. It's probably false. Same thing with all-time lows. All-time lows are probably not your true weight. It's the pattern of weigh-ins that tell us if we're moving in the right directions and if we have our true weight. And so if you see, up, down, but it's overall trending down, you're in a good spot. MyFitnessPal takes care of this pretty well as well. If you have an iPhone, I think it's only on Apple OS or whatever iPhones. Happy Scale is a really good one. Happy Scale tends to take out the trend, the up down, and they just show you the trend line, which is kind of nice to see where your weight truly is. But MyFitnessPal, does a pretty good job of this as well. And if you take daily weigh-ins, a lot of people think, weekly. Why would I take daily? It goes up and down. That's the whole point, is that if you take your weight every Monday, and that happened to be a spike high or a spike low, it's going to be hard to tell where you're truly at. The more data points you have, it only takes a week and a half, 2 weeks tops to easily see a trend. And you can very predictably make changes to your steps, your cardio, your protein, your calories, whatever. And I have other videos on that. In fact, I call it my dial system. If you want to check that out, click the link in the description for my dial system. That is what I run all my clients through, and it's a very effective way of losing weight and keeping it off because you're really in control of all those aspects. I go much more in detail there. But in order to understand how to tweak those things, you got to know exactly the way your weight is trending. And so taking daily weigh-ins by far is the best way of doing that. Now, again, I understand and I sympathize with you. This happens to me as well, where, sometimes individual weigh-ins can get to you. Even if you know it is not true, it just doesn't feel good to step on the scale and see a higher number. So I sympathize with that. You can start off with once a week. It's totally fine. It's just going to take longer to see a trend. And as you desensitize to that number on the scale and see, as the weight might have spiked, but as I'm doing the right things with time, it goes down. It gets easier and easier and easier to detach from that in terms of feeling. All right, so the second thing that you're going to track is going to be your steps. Now, this isn't because more steps equals more weight loss, and that's it, bottom line. There is more going on here for how I train my clients, at least. So more steps will equal more weight loss in general. They're just not the holy grail or anything. I'm not saying that, a person who walks 20,000 steps is just going to have a breeze, although it is going to be hard to be overweight if you're walking 20,000 steps every single day. I only walk 14 to 16, and that's, with moving around a lot. So I guess, there is a certain point where it's hard to be overweight if you're moving that much. With that said, there's plenty of people that do move a whole lot, so it's not like steps are magical. But the reason I like steps is because as your fitness improves, as your workouts get harder, I don't want it to accidentally reduce your calorie burn throughout the rest of the day by moving less. So let's say, you did a really hard cardio workout, which I could talk about the difficulty of cardio in a different video. But let's say you did, a good cardio workout and a good weightlifting session that day and you're tired. And therefore your total daily steps went from 10,000 down to 6,000. That 4,000 step gap would totally, and that might be hard to do if you had a good cardio session that day, but still, let's hypothetically say that happened. That 4,000, whatever I said, step gap, that is now less calories than you normally would have burned on that day. So even though you burn more through the cardio session, that's why it feels like a person, you probably have heard plenty of stories, and I certainly have, of people that said they started doing a bunch of cardio and stopped losing weight or can't lose weight, and then they stopped doing cardio and now they're losing weight. And that's probably because if they took 8,000 steps, well, that's kind of ridiculous. If they took 3,000 steps during their cardio session, but the rest of the day walked 4,000 steps less because they were tired from the cardio session, that's going to obviously make up for it, at least in some capacity. And so you want to be tracking the steps to make sure they stay even. That's what I talk about in my dial system, is we don't want them accidentally falling. It is something you can crank up, you can dial it up, but we don't want them accidentally falling. So that's why you're tracking that. And the third thing that you are going to be tracking is going to be your lifting workouts. My favorite app for this is called Alpha Progression, but there's lots of them out there. You could also just track it in like a journal or something. It's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you're progressing or at least staying the same. That's going to be a reflection of your muscle mass, and that's so important. If your lifts across the board, not from workout to workout, but just in general, if you see they are trending down and you're getting weaker, that means that you're probably losing weight a little bit too fast. You're in too big of a calorie deficit and you're going to be losing muscle. And so we want to prevent that, obviously. And if we see that's happening, then we can eat a little bit more calories. If that is happening, though, you should for sure be losing weight. So at least you're moving in the right direction in that regard. But I promise you, by the end of this weight loss journey, you're going to like your shape, you're going to like your metabolism, you're going to like how you feel a lot better if you have kept your muscle. Not only kept your muscle, a lot of times whenever you're lifting, you can build muscle. That's another reason that we track our lifting workouts. If you do, 20 pounds 12 times, and now by the end of a, 6-week mesocycle, 6-week workout plan, you do 20 pounds 15 times or 30 pounds 12 times, then you know that you probably have built muscle. You could be getting stronger in other ways as well. But over the course of time, if you see you're getting stronger in your lifts, that means you're gaining muscle. That means your metabolism is going to be a little bit higher. Now, losing fat kind of affects that as well, and there's a lot that goes into that. But at least you're not completely wrecking your metabolism and knowing by the end you have to eat 1,200 calories in order to maintain this new body, which isn't even that shapely, you're just kind of skinny fat. And we can avoid that by having muscle. Okay, the last one is going to be tracking your protein. Now, I would prefer if a person tracked their calories because their protein would just come right with that. And so if you're already tracking your calories, you really don't have to worry as much about tracking your protein because it's already going to be included. But if you're not tracking your calories, specifically tracking your protein on the food labels and everything that you're consuming, that would be a good idea. More protein fills you up more, allows you to eat a little bit less. More protein also helps you keep more muscle, which we just discussed why it's better having more muscle. And then by eating more protein, you're going to burn more calories simply by eating it. about 25% of the calories that you eat in protein are used to digest the remainder of the protein. So if you eat 100 calories, did I say 20 or 25? I think it's 30 or 35. No, I don't know. About 30% of the calories you eat are going to be used for protein. So if you eat 100 calories, 70 of them is going to be usable. 30 of them is going to be used to digest that protein. And so you get free calorie burn, and that's why it's in my dial system with the calories and the protein. I mentioned that specifically because you can dial up your protein, get a little bit extra calorie burn. Now that there is like a cutoff point, like don't just eat protein and, cut out carbs. Keto does tend to have an easier time getting all their protein, but carbs will make you feel more energetic and stuff. There's a different conversation, but tracking your protein is definitely going to be helpful in you losing weight and actually keeping it off and losing that visceral body fat. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to learn how to actually keep the weight off, I think that's so essential. If you gain it back, what was the point? You can watch the video right here. I talk more in depth about my plan that I use for my clients to keep the weight off and lose it in the first place.